Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphna and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact, so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit, and makes a difference. Molly and Chris are an extraordinary couple, and like many of us, they juggle many balls of parenting, work, life, community, and everything else that goes on. Until one day when all those balls just came crashing down to earth. Chris was diagnosed with Guillain Barre syndrome. It's a rare disease that's also difficult to diagnose. It often takes a long time before doctors realize exactly what's going on. And in this episode, they both share their story with us. Each has a different perspective. One partner struggling for survival, while the other continues to keep life going for their 4 kids, keep on working, keep on communicating to family and friends. And this is a story that is heart-wrenching and brave. While it's not specifically about leadership, it actually has everything to do with taking leadership in your life, staying positive, and growing through pain and challenge. So listen to this episode and be inspired by Molly Weisgram and Chris Maxwell. And as always, for great leadership resources and information about our events and programs, head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com and grab yourself a copy on Amazon of my book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. And if you want to know more about that, if you want to know more about how to develop the habits for being a confident and inspiring CEO with a winning team, then ask me about our extraordinary CEO habit process. So head on to my website, pick up those resources, and if you enjoy listening to Leadership Live, please do leave a review and share it with a friend. Hi, Molly and Chris. I'm excited to have you on the show today, and you've got an awesome story to share with us. So I want to just dive right in. So Molly, maybe take us into that moment. And I remember reading in your book that you came home expecting a normal day, and it just wasn't a normal day. So maybe just take us right into that.
Sure. Our coming home after work, a normal day for us was, and this particular day was, I guess, trying to figure out how to get food on the table for everybody, cooking after a long day of work and 4 children. And we had a new baby.
How old were the children at that point?
At the time, they were between 8 years and 8 months. So okay. I think eight, 6, 3, and 8 months old. So we were really just getting used to still kind of creating a normal with our new addition of a 4th child and me going back to work after maternity leave and just, trying to do the craziness of life. So this particular day that we're talking about, we came home, everything's normal in its chaotic family way. And Chris mentions something about I just haven't been feeling, it was a good day. I led a strategic planning session and I was on, certainly on my feet, but just not feeling totally right. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go to the doctor. And kind of in this challenging way, oh, well, how bad is it?
Yeah. And if I can pause there for a moment, because I don't know what it's like for you, but I think for many of us, sometimes we do take that I'm not feeling so well from our male counterparts with a little bit of a pinch of salt, right? Okay, mm-hmm. I'll deal with dinner. I'll put our 4 children together while you just rest on the couch. So Chris, for you, that's interesting to me because, we have our little hiccups, whether it's a sore throat or a snotty nose or whatever it is. And we can have a day where we're not feeling ourselves. But was there something different about this day?
Yeah. So thank you for having us here too today. So it was there was leading up to that. There had been a couple days of what numbness and tingling in my feet and hands, and really the feeling like you can't get your hands or feet warmed up, and feeling just a little off that way. And then earlier that day, it was February in South Dakota, so cold, chilly day, and I had a gust of wind that hit my pant leg as I was carrying some things into my strategic planning session that morning, and it felt like somebody splashed cold water, like a bucket of cold water on my leg. And it was kind of a final straw of there's just too many weird things going on here, and I'd been feeling off and off, and I just was nervous about all of these kind of nerve sensations, and that there was something that was pinching a nerve, or I was fear dreaming at this point. Do I have a growth somewhere? Do I have something that's festering that I need to find a way to get to the bottom of it?
Wow. Okay, so Molly, take us back to your part of the story. So you come home and Chris is saying, yeah.
Well, and of course, I don't know any of, I think there are times where life is busy enough, and Chris is somebody who doesn't really complain, to be honest with you. So I hadn't heard days before him having any kind of tingling or numbness. I mean, none of that. This is all kind of like, oh, interesting. You don't feel that great. Maybe you should go to bed. Like maybe you just need to take care of yourself. Anyway, I challenged him. I was like, oh yeah, did you, maybe you should go to the doctor. And he said, oh, I already made an appointment. And at that moment I was like, oh, well, congratulations. Good for you, I guess. All right. And then we basically did our thing and took kids to bath and to bed. And, I remember, oddly enough, feeling kind of unsettled feeling, though. I mean, just kind of this, I don't know if it was just the point in our life. I didn't know, but I just had sort of this like mounting angst. Anyway, the next day I can tell Chris is definitely off. I mean, he is a little antsy in that he's ready to go to the doctor. Like, but and I kind of queried him and said, is this something you'd want me to go with you? Again, kind of with a grain of salt, and he said, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Again, a moment where my eyebrows raised, because that's unusual. I mean, that wouldn't be
totally out of the norm for me.
Yeah,
totally.
Really. And so again, the question, what made you? Yeah.
I was feeling a point of really nervous. I was hoping it was a little thing, but it had long enough that for me, now Molly wouldn't know any of that. Molly was just like, oh, maybe you should go get checked out.
Yeah. And for you, it's just been brewing for long enough that something was niggling at you, that this is not just a regular, I'm not feeling well.
Okay. Exactly.
Okay. So then who wants to carry on the story? Either of you, I don't mind. You go to the doctor?
Yeah, go ahead.
We go to the doctor, where in our small town in South Dakota is one of our good friends, and certainly hadn't been to the doctor seen him in that capacity. And I'm feeling very uncomfortable about being there, because I'm like, what am I doing here with my husband at the doctor? But anyway, it was very interesting. He did like a physical workup where he kind of pressed on his shoulders and did different kinds of, he was kind of testing his musculature, and Chris had significant weakness in one shoulder, basically couldn't keep his arm up when the physician was pushing down. And for the physician, and somebody we know personally, he was like, oh, I don't like that. That's, and that wouldn't have even been anything if I'd been like, oh, that's super weird, but, So anyway, because he was alarmed enough at this kind of the sides of your body, one side being weaker, and the fact that Chris was actually really surprised by it, didn't realize there was weakness, went through a series of tests all day long. And Chris, as the day went on, he just kept kind of getting a little weaker and weaker, and kept prodding with different kinds of tests. I kind of thought maybe Chris would just back off, like, oh, I don't think I need a spinal tap. I think I'll just go take a nap.
So he was admitted at this stage. You were admitted, Chris, at this stage. into the hospital.
By the end of the day, I was. So we went. There were tests in the morning, and then some more tests in the afternoon, and then ultimately, which wonderfully we had these doctors. One, a good friend that started this for us, and really was an investigator on all of it, and just was digging into it, and it just didn't seem to keep making sense. And so they ultimately said, "Hey, I think you should go to the emergency room, get a spinal tap done, and then if we don't know anything or we don't find anything out, I really would suggest you check into the hospital." And I was feeling like, yeah, that all made sense, which totally would not have been my my approach in any other setting. I would definitely was feeling off to that point of
this needs to be checked out, and we need to get to the bottom of some answers
exactly,
here. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they admitted me that evening. I mean, I went from they did the spinal tap and didn't find anything, which is not they didn't find anything during all these tests, so it still was.
So everything came back normal.
Everything came back
wow.
normal. That's part of the Guillain Barre syndrome when people are trying to diagnose it or recognize it, that there aren't any signs until a certain point. And so you can go for a long time and go from doctor to doctor, and everyone's doing all the things the right way. And if you don't have a relationship, or you don't know that person, it could be, it's probably just the virus. Just go home and have some have a little tea and soup, and rest up, and hopefully it'll be better tomorrow.
Wow.
And so
we actually haven't mentioned what it was until this moment when you just kind of mentioned it, but it was Guillain Barre. And what does that mean? I mean, maybe just, I know we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but maybe Molly, take us to the place of diagnosis. When did that happen, and what does it mean?
Right.
Actually, what is this disease?
Yeah, it was only the next day, to be honest. And Chris, at this point, really, I didn't see him walk again. By the way, after he walked into that hospital, I didn't see him walk again for 6 to 8 months. I mean, and when I say walk, that's like just stand up, really. So Guillain Barre syndrome, he basically by the morning he had no reflexes in his knees, and he was diagnosed with Guillain Barre syndrome, which I had never heard of before. Chris had never heard of. Guillain Barre syndrome is a rare autoimmune disorder. I think about 100,000 in the world are diagnosed each year. But basically, it's just this fluke scenario where your body gets confused. Often for a simple virus or bacteria, it gets confused, and rather than kind of fighting that virus or bacteria, it gets confused and it starts to attack your own body. So, and it attacks your nerves. So rather than your messages from your brain kind of going to the right spot on your body so that you can move your hands, you can move your legs, there's no connection point because of the way that your body has started to wear down on the myelin sheath of your nervous system. So you basically become paralyzed. Now there's varying severities. When the physician came in and said you have Guillain Barre syndrome, he said there's a lot of different scenarios. You just have to kind of play this one out and see what yours is.
How do you diagnose it? Is it a blood test? How do you actually diagnose it?
Typically, it's that spinal tap, and they go in and they pull out spinal fluid. And if it's cloudy, that's one of a major key that there's some kind of degradation of. But in this case, Chris didn't have a test that indicated that.
Came back normal.
But it's the tingling hands and feet, kind of that initial symptom. And then the fact that he had this weakening, experience, all of the other tests came back just normal. And then the reflexes, they said it's kind of telltale, like you don't have reflexes, all of these other pieces are fitting, puzzle pieces are coming together. The neurologist and the physician we were with, they felt really comfortable. Mm-hmm. And we're just lucky that the physician that we had championing us was familiar, because Chris is right. Most people don't get a diagnosis right away because it's so bizarre and unusual.
It really is an investigative process. I mean, they are going through all of and as we learn more as we went further on, how all the nerve connections at the different points in your body, they're kind of tracking Is this happening on both sides of your body? Where is this happening at? And they go those points that all the way go back to your central nervous system and all the way up to where the signals come from the brain, and a process of elimination get back down to got back down to, for us, Guillain Barre syndrome. For others, it might have been a different diagnosis of their process, but they're investigators, really.
Yeah, and Chris, so I understand that by the next morning you couldn't stand up already.
Yeah, I would, with assistance, I would have needed help. I didn't really get up.
That's scary. All of a sudden.
It was happening so quickly, but wonderfully, and I say wonderfully because we've always tried to take a positive approach towards any of the things that come into our life. What do we learn from it, and how do we grow? But wonderfully, when the doctor came in, they say, and you could read it online, 90 to 95% of the time you get a chance to get back to normal, and what can get back to a normal life that you knew of before you got this, after you have Guillain Barre syndrome. So when the doctor shared that, we were like, oh, okay. Great.
So that's where the work lies. The work lies in getting back to normal.
Yeah, and we're going to get a chance to recover. We might have to go through something, but there's a great chance of recovery. So we immediately had hope with it, and had that. All right, we just gotta move through this, and we can come out on the other side. So just that positive hope, and then. As Chris, the doctor walked go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, because you said sometimes or often it gets missed, and from what I understand, it gets worse and worse, and the paralysis gets worse and worse until sometimes it's not reversible, from what I understand about it. So it sounds to me like it was also caught at the right time for you.
I don't know if that's the case. You really don't know what's going to happen until you go through it. And literally, it's hard to predict who's going to. I mean, that's the scary part about it. It's a waiting game. So Chris eventually, I think 5 days later, Chris was completely quadriplegic on a ventilator. We were thinking, okay, well, at least if you Google this, you only kind of slide into the depths of terrible for 2 to 4 weeks. So
wow,
we'll get back, right? We're going to get back to normal. It'll be okay. But this is a severe case. And then we have a physician walk in as we're in the ICU and just kind of bracing for dear life, let us know that, in fact, this is beyond, this is one of the severest kind of cases. And that means not only is part of the outside part of the nerve damaged, but also there's probably nerve damage. And we don't know how long you're going to be paralyzed. We don't know how long you're going to be quadriplegic on a ventilator. It could be months, it could be years. And kind of like you just have to wait. It's one of those times in your life you're going to have to wait. And this is such a dramatic moment, right? But I'm sitting there.
At that moment,
I'm sitting
your whole
there.
World just comes crashing down.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. And at that point for me, I didn't want to hear it. And that wasn't what and maybe what we all needed to hear. And we found that along the way of we all needed to hear different things at different times. And, the messages and the process were for us. And that inspired me to prove him wrong and show him that that wasn't going to be the case for me. And it also inspired Molly, I think, as she'd speak to learn more and to dive deeper into why he said that and what we need to be prepared for, and was a real touch point in all of this.
So how long were you in this state of quadriplegic and on a ventilator? That's I would imagine already critical.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So total of 9 months was the time from diagnosis to me coming back home. So actually Valentine's Day of 2019 all the way to Halloween of 2019. And so I would have been on a ventilator a week after Valentine's Day. So that would have been when I was taken to the ICU and my diaphragm stopped working. And I was on a ventilator for 15 weeks. So almost four months, and then the getting back to walk again. I really with assistance, with a walker, with support. Walked for the first time really 5 months after it started. So it was a total rebirth. When you're in the hospital that long, you lose all your muscle, all the muscle mass, especially when you can't move anything at all. And so I lost 60 pounds of really pretty much all muscle, was a skeleton of myself. And then your nervous system the wires have been stripped. And so your body has to slowly and wonderfully they heal. So a gratitude again, thankfully they can heal again, and they started to. And so slowly from the inside out, from the core of my body towards the extremities, I started to be able to move again. And they reteach you how to do everything, and you have to reconnect your mind to your body as well. And so there's just a whole rehabilitation process that is critical, taking all those right next steps to really bring you back to life.
And how long ago was this, Chris? How long ago since you were released from hospital?
Yeah, so it's a little over 2 years ago that this all started.
Okay.
And so it would have been February, Valentine's Day of 2019 that it would have started. And then I would have gotten back a year and a half ago or so, or maybe a little.
Basically home by 2020.
And how are you today? Just to skip back and just show you, because I can see you and you look absolutely fine. But how are you really today?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that too. I'm doing fantastic. To cut to the quick on it, I just did a half marathon, and first of my life, and never would have. I wouldn't have dreamed of doing that
awesome.
Before.
Awesome.
I was physically active, but not that distance or level of activity there. And planning a Olympic distance triathlon here in a month or so. But I do still continue to I really can't feel my feet that well. I have residual nerve damage.
Maybe that's why you can run so well. You don't feel the pain.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. I did joke. No, I did joke when I started running again. I told people, I was like, it used to take me like a mile to have my body just not totally hurt. And because I can't feel the bottom of my legs very well, it's a little bit easier. So,
well, I have to say, go ahead.
Yeah, but so I really am outside of that, the kind of residual nerve damage in my lower part of my legs, ankles, feet, which I'm working on my own rehab and workout stuff for that still, and a little bit of breathing. My trachea has a little bit of some scar tissue, and so have been working on that as well. I'm fantastic. I get to live and play with my kids and rebuild my life with my wife and do all of this working out and physical activity and just really to climb out of that abyss, that hole that we found ourselves in, unendingly gratitude. People ask me what percentage recovery I'm at, and I almost always start with, I'm 1,000% if you think about where we came from. There's still some distance to go and some things to work on, but just so much gratitude for where I'm at.
Awesome. Wow, what a story. And I just want to say that I can relate a little bit, and I'm curious even just from my own personal point of view, because I had a kind of life scare after I had we've got 3 children, my 3rd baby was born, and I had major complications, which many people do not survive, and I did survive. So we had those moments in hospital where I was on a ventilator. I was on a ventilator for 3 days. My husband was told that, they've done everything they can for me, and that, everyone's just got to pray because there's nothing more they can do. So just that experience of like just knowing that, something, your world is falling apart, whether it's, the spouse or the person going through it. Because I remember even on the ventilator, firstly, it was so uncomfortable. I was so absolutely everywhere. I was in huge amounts of pain, but I thought I was dying. I thought for sure I was dying, and there was no question in my mind. And I remember almost having a conversation with God, like, if this is the end, then let it be the end. What am I hanging around for? So I'm curious to know if you had any of those kind of thoughts.
Well, I'll start and then I will hand it over to Molly quickly, just in that it's interesting the different paths you walk and what it is being the spouse or the caregiver and the one going through it. For me, the difference with all of it, even though there were scary moments and the moment of not being able to breathe again, or not being able to breathe and rush to the ICU, and just a number of traumatic, dramatic moments. I always had the thought or hope that I was going to recover. And so I was just thinking the whole time, I just got to work through this. I just need to, this is a path and a journey I need to walk. And in fact, even when I was diagnosed, Molly turned to me and said, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to us. We're going to be the best people we can be because of this. And so I had this thought in my mind of, we're going through this hero's journey, if you will, and going to get to the other side. And so I never let my thoughts go to that point of this is going to be the end, even though it was like, it happened a number of times that it was very close. But I can't imagine having to be the person sitting there watching me go through it, or watching you go through it, that caregiver, and the person standing there trying to hold it all together and figure out what they do with all of it that's happening. And that's Molly, Molly's
with little
story
kids
and
at
Molly's
home.
journey.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna jump in there, and then I'd love to hear from you, Molly, as well. But for me, it was kind of a knowledge that this is the end, and I was actually fine with it. I wasn't scared or anything like that. But for me, and I think for me that was a big life-changing moment, was that all I cared about at that point was that my children should know that I love them, and that my husband should know that I love him, and that everyone should know how much I love them. And I had a journey afterwards, also complications or whatever. I needed more surgery, and I just remember that feeling of, I came out of that experience also with that, there's a bit of a euphoria of I'm alive, and then every time something happened, it was, I need to let everybody know that I love them. Like, that was my thing,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's, it for me, I think similar to you, it's kind of a total ego stripping, life stripping experience where it just pulls everything away and pulls you back down to what matters most. And I do agree with you, just that gratitude was the thing for me, just being grateful and thankful for what everyone was doing for me and how the world was supporting me and lifting me up, and grateful for the little things to get a little bit better. And so, I'm so happy you recovered.
Thank you. Me too, actually. And you, I'm happy you're good. But I think that what you said, these moments or these experiences are really the things that change us. And I know that a lot changed for me after that. But Molly, let's hear your perspective, because I know my husband's perspective. My mom was there, my dad, my siblings were overseas, but it influences everyone. Like, the whole family comes together, and the whole community as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's obviously it's traumatic. I mean, it's traumatic for everyone. It's traumatic to watch your person kind of go into this place of, it's the waiting place, the place where you don't know if you're getting someone back. Right. And it's a real look in the mirror of like who you are because of that other person. Like, we as humans are wired for relationship. And when we, in my experience, like when we commit to our spouse and then you've had, several years with that person, you've created a life that has, you've entwined so many things, even your behaviors, like, this is what I do, this is what he does, this is what I think just so much of who we are is because of the other. And I think it's that moment of like, not only are you in trauma, but you're also trying to figure out like, okay, who am I? Like, who am I without this person? And how are we gonna, in my case, I was thinking a lot about our kids. Like, I wanted to keep the kids away from the situation because I kept thinking maybe he would be off of that ventilator and we'd be able to bring them in kind of at that tail end. Well, our tail end ended up being so much longer that I couldn't protect them from that experience, which I really wanted to. And so then it's also about like, okay, how do you how do you parent and how do you walk them through emotionally as you're trying to walk yourself through it? It's one of those things where I keep thinking about, like, life wasn't designed, like we were never promised this life that would be a suffering free thing, right? Like that's not at all so what true. We can expect out of life. And we none of it, I mean, yeah, we kind of like laugh at that, but when it happens, you're like, how can this be happening? Like what, and why? And exactly. And why? And, Chris mentioned what I had said. I'm really, really, really thankful that we'd had several years prior where we had done a lot of mental practice about, like, okay, the way you frame the things in your life create sort of a reality of your life. Like, if you expect it to be good, it will be good. If you expect it to be bad, it will probably be bad. Like, we had done a lot of practice. So for me to turn to Chris after diagnosis and say, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. We will be we'll be better people. That wasn't, this strike of amazingness. That was sort of a practice. And I'm so thankful for that because, that was always something I found amazing, like how you have a certain level of control with the way that, of your life, with the way, the thoughts you choose. Yeah. But you can't just pull that out in the most traumatic moments if you haven't practiced it. So it's funny how life can kind of pull you together and give you the experiences that you might need and build upon in order to.
Where did that practice come from? Because for me, I had no awareness of that. I was an actuary before I became only involved. I mean, I always knew I had that affinity for wanting to work with people and make a difference and all of that, but I didn't have any of that kind of knowledge, so to speak. So where did that come from for you?
Well, this thing, when the teacher, when the student's ready, the teacher shows up. And that's really we had an amazing opportunity with some beautiful people who really were teachers for us that really kind of introduced a philosophy that really fit our worldview probably anyway, but gave words and gave more practice to this idea. So I would really say it came from people who had spent time and opened their hearts and minds to different ways of thinking. Actually, really probably philosophy that is there's truth in every religion and every thought, the major think pattern, that there's this kind of like truth to it. So I had studied with the Centers for Spiritual Living, which is kind of an outlet to. I see all of these things as like doors to the same thing, but just different doors to the same idea of like this universal principle. And so, I really are the people who had the information wanted to open their hearts and minds to me and Chris, and we're really lucky.
And you guys are open to receiving it as well, which I think is so exactly. So I will add a caveat to what I said before, which is that, I am a religious, spiritual person, and I think we had that guiding us. So the way the community came together in support for us, and my husband, my family, myself, there was always that, that fundamental belief that things happen for a reason and that you grow from your pain and challenge and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Chris,
exactly.
did you want to add?
Well, I think we also had modeling from parents that helped guide us into how we reacted to hard things that came into our life, and taught us not to give up and to be optimistic and all of those kind of things. And then we also had, our journey together, Molly's and my journey together of how do we react to not things necessarily as dramatic or traumatic as this, but how had we reacted to trauma and challenges in our life before, had went through a wonderful business building as well as business not crawling out of the startup valley of death experience. And so we had some lessons of loss and failure and paths that we had to walk together before that really prepared us in
it's
many
all part
ways
of everything that you experience prepares you for whatever comes next. I truly
it's hard to, it's not even comparable what we did go through before that, but it was a very, very dramatic experience for us as well, and really taught us so much and helped guide us through the next challenge, and I'm sure we'll have other and many more in our life there, that where, as Molly said, challenge is part of life, and part of the things that we walk through, and it's how we walk through it, and how we approach it, and how we look at it, that really defines and helps drive who we are and the lives that we live.
So how has it changed you? And I know, it's so interesting, because before we got on this call, in our initial conversation, I said, well, let's make it about, work and leadership and all that. And I think sometimes actually these, it's all connected, first of all. And secondly, like I mentioned, I wrote my thesis on these personal defining moments and how they change us and how that impacts us in our work environment as leaders. So there's always that. But I think this, what happens to us is so rich, and it's not just about work. I think it changes you as a human being, as, everything changes. So how did it change you, and what changed for you? Who wants to go first? Molly.
Well, sure. Well, I guess for me, I really had to kind of do that sorting of, okay, who am I? Chris isn't here, and Chris needs to focus on what he needs to focus on, and I need to support him in every way I can. And I've got our 4 children. And so, I spent lots of time with him at the hospital. And he was in hospital
for 8 or 9 months. So all of a sudden you were thrown into this single parenting, caretaking or caregiving for Chris. There's I suppose working as well. There's a whole range of roles here that have all of a sudden changed just like that.
So that's exactly right. And so I think there's that moment of like, okay, you're carrying around this load or the burden of just all of the feelings that happen complicated feelings that happen when there's like a elongated trauma like this, but you're kind of sorting out, who am I and how am I going to show up in this situation? And sometimes it's by choice, and you can be intentional, and sometimes you just are hanging on every moment. But I think for me, it's been kind of a process of discovery. And for me, what was a huge, 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 huge part of, I guess, I don't know, maybe that discovery of self is I started writing about, I had to communicate this stuff to people. What I learned from a leadership perspective, what I learned is that in situations like ours, a really traumatic situation where basically Chris just disappeared from his life. He owns a business, he has clients, he has children, he has he has friends and people who care about him and us. And at first I was just like, I can't also communicate this. Like, I don't know. I just have to try to make sure I can do what I can to help support his life right now, literally. And then I realized that in crisis, you have to communicate. If you don't communicate, it's so much harder on everyone involved in so many ways. And if you don't communicate, there will be others who communicate your story, and maybe in a way you don't want it to be communicated. And so at the point in which I was like, I have to start doing this, it was again another blessing, because I didn't want to. I don't like being a victim, right? I don't want to communicate like, oh, I have a sick, this is, Chris is sick, poor us kind of thing. Like I did not want to be that. And so it took me a while to find the words, but when I started writing kind of for public consumption so that people could understand what was going on, and I did it every couple of weeks, it tracked the trajectory of, Guillain Barre syndrome is not pretty, and it's bumpy, and the trajectory of your healing when up close doesn't look like you're healing. It's just, I don't even know how to explain this. It's not fun. But this writing, I started to explore our wholeness, like even in struggle, like, okay, I started to I maybe tap into more of those spiritual principles that we had studied. And it was really more about like observation and how there were things to be learned and things to be grateful for and points of light. And there were observations of self when you're in the depths, and how do you, anyway, that was huge. So I learned a lot about communication, but I learned a lot about myself through doing that. I mean, it opened up or awoke something in me that was really, really powerful. And so when Chris returned, I had done a lot of counseling and a lot of things to explore. And honestly, the return is kind of another beginning, because you've now spent 9 months holding it together in your way. Yeah. And I had my certain boundaries for the kids. Like, nope, we're really strict about our certain, healthy food, go to bed at right times, like very, that was my control and my sphere of control.
Things
and I
needed everyone the way that you had set them up to work so that you could manage the situation in the best way.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Now so the re-entry, I imagine, is also a whole new thing to navigate.
Well, you think about it, Chris and I completely had different experiences that year. And I would go down and when Chris could suddenly talk again, because when you're ventilated, you can't talk. So he was really just gone, kind of withered away to just someone writhing in pain for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and gone because even, not that he couldn't speak, but also on different medications and just pain wise. So yeah, it's really, I think a lot of the work for us begins in a different kind of work upon return, because, think about what Chris just experienced. And yet I've got my own thing. So there's now this opportunity to come together, but we're both tired. So the writing actually became something I continued to do. I really wanted to explore what a second chance looked like, because that's what we have, right? Like, this is that moment where afterwards you're like, whoa, wake up, call, like, life isn't forever. And we get to continue on with our story somehow with this really monumental life thing that happened. And are we going to make the same choices? So I wanted to write about that. I wanted to kind of dig into, like, what do you do with that? And I realized that there's a lot of work to be done to get to that point. And that's okay. Like, I had to kind of untangle that trauma. I had those first 6 weeks just constantly flash in my mind. Like, I could hear and smell, and I have kind of a bad memory, to be honest with you, but I was stuck there. So, so it was quite wonderful to actually pull my journal entries that I'd put together as Chris was sick, but then kind of tell the backstory, and I wove it all together into a book that I wrote. But what was so good about it was that Chris, every morning, so I'd get up super early, I'd write, and then Chris would come down, and over coffee, I'd be able to read what I put together. That gave Chris this opportunity to suddenly come back into my and the kids' life with some perspective, right? He had to focus on himself to be able, the energy it took him to be able to recover his body was, it was all consuming, and it was important to me that was his focus, because that was an investment in our life. Right. But it was another investment in life to come back and to try to understand each other. And that's, right. It's not always as easy as you think it's going to be.
Amazing.
Yeah. We've talked about how, trauma, especially something dramatic like we went through in the time frame that we went through with the hospitalization and all of that, is really like 1,000 points of separation. All these little things keep pulling you apart, whether it's, the actual thing that happens, being in a hospital room, the equipment you're on, the state that you get in, all these things that start pulling you apart, and the time that happens with it. And then recovery is 1,000 points of reconnection. And that's what we've been going through. It takes time, and it takes conversations, and it takes the relationship building. You're different. You've both grown and went through something dramatic and traumatic, and yes, together in many ways, but also we're all doing these things separately. We're doing them from our own perspective. And so So having that space to work on it together, and a spouse who loves you enough to put the time into it and wants to explore it, has been everything with the process.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So amazing story, really, and just I can see and hear and feel the strength that you have as a couple to be able to get through something like this, because as you say, I love the 1,000 points of separation and 1,000 points of reconnection, because I think it's so true. There's a lot of learning that needs to be done. So just before we end, and you can share how people can reach you and your book and all of that, but what is your message? What is it that you want to leave the listeners? What is your message for the world, for people out there? What have you learned? Just maybe as both of you, Molly, start with you, then Chris, what is it that you want to, your final kind of thoughts on the matter that you want to share with our listeners today?
Well, a teacher once said to us probably that, life is really for the refinement of your soul. And I think when you come at it with that perspective, that pain can maybe refine you into something that is even closer to who you're supposed to be. I think mine is really just the fact that kind of vulnerability and authenticity. I mean, while we hear those words a lot lately, they really are the thing that we can contribute generally to our peers, our community. And I say that because I really feel like we're all walking at all times, a line of trying to keep everything together. And I think those difficult things maybe are opportunities for you to contribute what you're supposed to contribute to, and to not run away from it, and just to kind of to stand in it. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, but it's not easy, but I think it's about really maybe taking life not in a non-dualistic way, and just kind of trying to accept it and figure out that there are lessons, and what are these, which ones am I supposed to have here?
Okay, so share one lesson. What was your, I'm sure there were a lot, but what was one lesson that you can share with us that you feel was your lesson in this, or still
mine? I think was stepping into myself. I think that I was always someone who was comfortable being in kind of a background kind of way, not really stepping into my power and or my voice. And I think that because I had to be self-reliant, and because I had to communicate, and because I've really found a new part of myself, a part that I think is I can contribute more in this way than before. I was supposed to step through this threshold, or this veil of it was a scary place to present myself, I guess, to communicate my thoughts and feelings, which are always, in my book, it's a very intimate book. But I think that vulnerability is actually powerful. So I think that was a lesson. I had to step into myself and be more of a leader.
Beautiful. And Chris, for you, what is your message? And also maybe what is the one lesson that you learned that you want to share?
A tagline of our company before I got sick, and we still use it some, is think big and take action. And so, we've helped organizations think about what matters most to them, and really, set goals and refine where they're going and who they are, and what's next for them. But within all of that, there's consistent practices that we like to talk about that would make an organization, a startup organization, or an organization going through change, successful. And so I was preaching those things and thinking about those things, and they were building in me as practices that mattered most to me. And then we got hit with this personally. And we were stripped down to that basic place of everything pulled away, everything falling away. and had to really take a hard look in the mirror and take some of my own medicine, I guess, if you will. And I realized, you show up with what you have. So you show up with the practices you've done already. And so whatever you've been doing to that point, you don't get to magically flip on a switch and say, now I have these things. You need it. It is a daily practice. It's a journey to become the best that you can be. And we're all constantly working on it. And so recognizing that it's all about those things that through every day help you be the best you can be. And for me, I got quotes up all along on my walls. My dad did that when I was younger. So that was modeled for me. The lessons I was taught from my mother growing up, and then just all of my own lessons really formed and shaped, I think, how I reacted and responded in that place. And then it's just about how you show up and how you walk that journey and how you take action, with the other biggest thing being, what are your big goals and your big vision? I think we recognize really quickly that if you don't have a big thing that you're striving for or you're going after, if you're not dreaming about recovery, it's kind of, as Molly said, we have a choice to have something be good for us or bad for us. And we chose to see it as good, and we chose to see all of the adversity as challenges that were meant for us to make us the best that we could be. And you can't always control the outcomes. There's a million points of things that can take something the wrong direction in something we went through. And so sometimes luck tips your way and sometimes it doesn't. But you can create opportunities, and you can create spaces and places for the best thing to happen for you, and you can see things as for you. And so we set big goals and set big dreams of what we wanted and where we wanted our life to go from there, and that this was going to make us the best we can be. And we're still working on that. It's a lifelong journey for sure. Yeah. And even when you come back from the trauma that we went through, getting home is the next challenge, and raising your kids then again 6 months later, life keeps going. And so you have your next challenge as a parent, and next challenge with your business and with your relationships. And so it then again becomes about your practices. It becomes about how you show up every day and the things you have that help you get through the day, the small daily things and the big dramatic things.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for sharing your story today. And I think that it's just an incredible story, and incredibly strong, full of strength and inspiration. And also for both of the perspectives, because I think there's a person going through it, like you said, Molly, where it's like a very individually inward, me-focused kind of experience, because you've just got to heal. For the person outside of that, having to carry everything and your own emotions with it, it's really, really, it's a big story. It's both your story, and I just think that you are both incredible for what you have done and how you've gone through it, and the message that you're sharing with everyone today. So just wish you everything of the best, and just keep your strength and keep your positivity and those big dreams, because I think that's very, very important as well. So thanks so much. Before we sign off, Molly, tell us where we can find you. I'll put it all in the show notes, but tell us about the book title. You mentioned the book, you didn't mention what it's called, and where we can find you and all of that.
Yeah, my book is called The Other Side of Us, a memoir of trauma, truth, and transformation. And really probably the best place is to go to my website, which is mollyweisgram.com. But you can find me on social too, Facebook and Insta, and at Molly Weisgram.
And we will put all of those in the show notes. And Chris, if we want to get hold of you, you can also share some of your, what is your various...
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to get a hold of me or kind of check out kind of even some of the things that I was just sharing, at maxwellstrat.com is my business, and really the philosophy of how I try to live. And so you can find me there.
And we'll put that in the show notes too. So thanks again, and just have a beautiful day going forward.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. This has been fun.
This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.